Hey everybody, so glad to be here. Thanks for coming, especially after Chick-fil-A. It was really, rushed to the table. I'm a big fan of Chick-fil-A, and I'm an even bigger fan of B-Sides Augusta. I've been to all but one, and I had some issues. I couldn't come, but always come, always look, always just enjoy what's happening in this area. It's just so exciting on everything. It's just like the investment would go up. I knew the impact at cyber in this area was going up, but it's just mind-blowing. It's a delight to talk about this, and so the thing I want to talk about is some keys to be a successful Chief Information Security Officer. I've been privileged to have that role in many different organizations, and what I want to do is talk about some of those keys in particular, to help you understand some areas that might be neglected if you're not careful with respect to leading people that lead people that do cybersecurity things. And so that's the purpose of this talk. Is anybody here already a CISO? Anybody done, or senior security leader? A couple of, yep. So good to see that. And I think that that's really key, is to, whether you're interested in that or not, or you want to understand what's going on in the mind of someone who leads cyber, this is for you. My goal is I wanted to think about the me several years ago, a long time ago, in fact 11 years ago, decided that I wanted to be a Chief Information Security Officer, but I wasn't ready. I remember when I applied for that first job, and I didn't even get an interview, and I thought, well, I've been in cyber for a while, I've done some things, I've done all the things I knew to do, and it's a good reason that company didn't hire me or promote me into that role, because there's all kinds of things I didn't know to be successful. So my goal for this time together is to share some things that I've learned, with the hopes that at a minimum you don't have to learn these things as well. And so that's what I wanted to focus on with this conversation. And to do that, I want to go back in time, like a long time ago, 25 years ago. While this is not, didn't have a cell phone 25 years ago. 25 years ago, the job I had was what's shown up here on the screen. I was working at Maytag in Southeast Tennessee. My job was to run a machine sort of like this, except the ones I worked on was dirtier, heavier, older, all those ers there. And my job was to go in 6 days a week and help run machines that basically made parts to ultimately produce a Maytag stove. That was my job. I worked really hard. For that, I could just get a job, everything would be great, it would be awesome, I would like that, it pays well, very well respectable position in the community that I was living in. I thought I had arrived when I had that job. And after doing that, to two people, one person works on one side of the machine to kind of put some in down and 500 tons worth of force, and out the other side it's bended or it has a hole in it, or things to forward the progress of making stoves. I was on the receiving end. And so the person on the giving to me end, he'd been there for 30 years. For 30 years, he would take it, put it there, the machine would come down and hand it off to someone, and that someone in this case was me. And I said to myself, I could do this, it's a good paying job, great benefits, nothing wrong with the job I was doing. I decided that wearing steel-toe shoes, long-sleeve shirts, protective gear, all the things, because of an environment like that, I thought to myself, what would it look like if I didn't do that the rest of my professional career? It's exactly what I had that conversation. So my shift, 4:30 in the afternoon to 3 in the morning, usually 6 days a week. I went in early one day. And one day I went in early and I went to talk with HR. I said, hey, HR, I remember during orientation, you said that one of the many benefits at Maytag was that if I go to school, and correct me if I'm wrong, but if I go to school, you'll pay for it. Did I get that right? Do I remember from that? And as it turns out, that's exactly what happened. They said, yes, we have that benefit. Go get a receipt, go pay for things, bring it back, and we'll find a way. But what was curious to me is they said this: we've never had anybody from the plant doing, manufacturing work to ever do this. So they said, they were honest, they were transparent. They said, no one's ever done that before. We'll go figure it out while you go and pay and bring back the receipts, and we'll make it all right. And they did make it all right. this hunch I had, this idea I had, I think I want to do something else, really led me to the place that I'm at today. And that idea of what is it like to want more? What is it like to want to do more? So whether you're a CISO, whether you want to be a CISO someday, or you may very well wonder what rattles in the mind of someone who leads people, that does cybersecurity, this is the talk for you. And again, I want to share 4 key areas of what that looks like, and what that looks like to go think about what is success? What is the win? How do I know when I find it? How do I know when I get there? What's so funny, at my last full-time job, I was privileged to lead the security function for the Federal Reserve Bank of Atlanta. Atlanta's home for me. I always come to B-Sides Augusta from Atlanta. But because of remembering where I used to work and the things I used to do, and it's a good job, it just didn't allow me to do the things I wanted to do. When I walked in the halls, very big, very nice, very prominent halls of the Federal Reserve Bank of Atlanta and all the places I've worked ever since, typically in the morning on Monday, someone will say, how you doing? It's Monday. Oh God, it's Monday. All the things, you've said that, I've said that, you hear that, and it's become kind of normal. But when people would ask me that question, when they would say, Russell, it's Monday, it's 8 o'clock in the morning, boy, I wish we had another long day weekend, I got to recover from all the things I did over the weekend, and I get that, I understand that, I respect that. But when they would look at me and they would say, how are you doing? I would always have the very same answer. And people would laugh at me, and I'm okay with that. But they would say, how are you? And I would say, I'm living the dream. And why would I say that? Because just a couple of slides ago, I showed just a little glimpse into the area when I, frankly, wasn't living the dream. 25 years ago, my story was not standing in here and talking about these things. 25 years ago, it was sweat, hot, no air conditioner. For me, very unsafe environment, could be hurt or injured at any time because of the working conditions. And I thought to myself, not living the dream at all. So when people say, how are you doing? I'm old enough to remember to be able to go back in time and recall what that looks like. And so what I realized to get that transition from where I was to where I'm privileged to be at today, the place where I'm literally living the dream, it took 4 things. What are the 4 things? They just letter C. It wasn't my intention. It just kind of played out that way. And I want to walk you through that journey of constraints, culture, clarity, and customer service. Nothing technical at all. Not one of those things is really technical things, but in leading people that lead people that do cybersecurity for the most critical things that perhaps could be done. And so let's talk about the first one. The first one is constraints. What constraints are necessary for someone to be and serve as a successful Chief Information Security Officer? In this case, it's a gate, kind of keep out, restrictive. What are some constraints? What are some things that someone to be a successful cybersecurity leader does not need to have? Perhaps, if you're like me, I started at the lowest of the low on the org chart in cyber and worked my way up through different organizations, moving, relocating, training, certifications, all the things that we do. But in that journey, my job, I had a couple of responsibilities, but one of them was to be in charge of Windows security for a large healthcare company in Southeast Tennessee. Before my first day at that job, I had been entered into a group, domain admins, and so I had full admin privileges, which looking back, maybe wasn't the best idea, but that was what was necessary. I had that, I had to do those things, and I had that access. What did that mean? That meant I could basically do anything I wanted to from a security and configuration perspective in the domain. No one was going to tell me no. I had all the rights, all the permissions. But as I started to move up into my journey of leadership, team leader, manager, supervisor, all the things like that, the need for me to maintain and keep that access dwindled, like pretty fast. And while I've been to school, I've had the training, I've learned, and I was pretty proficient after several years of doing that at administering a domain, my job at the time did not require that. Started to move up the organization, I needed less and less administrative access to do my job because my job wasn't always hands on keyboard playing around with group policy. What are some places, what are some areas where, even though maybe in an approval process, oftentimes the security leaders will say, yes, you can be in that group, or yes, you can do that thing, or yes, you can interpret the policy that way. Just because you can doesn't necessarily mean that you could. Again, that idea of what are some constraints. And so there we go. Just because you can doesn't mean you could. Got some big thumbs up there. Yeah, from a fellow CISO. Yeah, that's exactly right. Just because you can doesn't mean you should. And what might that look like? When I had 5.5, 6.5, 7.5 years ago, when I started at my last full-time job, I was really excited about coming in and proving to the organization that they've made a good hiring decision. I wanted to come in and impress them, give them some ideas. Ooh, never thought of it that way. We're so glad you're here. Good job. We're so glad that you're here, Russell. That was my, I didn't tell anybody that before telling you here right now, but that was my goal when I started my most previous full-time job. So I wanted to come in and make a big impact. And as life would happen, wouldn't you know it, a couple of weeks into my tenure, back in 2015, there was a security incident. And a lot of the work that I've done in the past is around incident response, building teams, responding, recovering, all the work that comes with that. And you've done that work, typically 5 o'clock on a Friday, before a long weekend, you get a call and it kind of ruins your plans. That's been an area that I quite. So new to the job, executive over the cybersecurity program, I decided I want to come in and make a big impact. Hey, chief of the incident handling team, I think I'll take this one. What were they going to say? Well, you're my boss's boss's boss. They didn't give me much verbal resistance, but I don't know if I read heard the words no, hard no, don't do that. Went in, low severity, worked through it, briefed, did the things, coordinated, do this, do that, here's the report, here's the brief, all the stuff, it worked out just fine. But I'll never forget about that. That was back in 2015. I'll never forget that because I made a mistake. The chief of the incident handling team shouldn't have had to say to the chief information security officer, no, Russell, it's my job to lead the team that responds to incidents. No, Russell, it's not. You don't even have access to all these. You're still the FNG. Still the. There's something better for you to do, whatever that thing is. What constraints are necessary? Because our time is limited, how can we best spend our time? Again, looking at constraints there might be a way to think about that. Oops. There we go. Again, in access control, are there certain groups, certain meetings, certain things that we've accumulated over time? And maybe you've seen that. I've certainly seen that as the longer you're at an organization, the longer your tenure, the more likely that you have like a whole bunch of groups and projects and SharePoints and all the access that you have that you might have needed in the past, but perhaps you don't need right now. What would it look like if there was a process, a calendar reminder, a recurring nudge that says, does Russell still need to be a domain admin? Does Russell still need to go to that meeting? Does Russell still, in service of trying to be in earnest a successful chief information security officer, does he still need the things that he has, the group memberships, et cetera? What would it look like to revisit that, to prune that up and think about what are the examples, what are the places where perhaps we've accumulated too much access control? Again, constraints. What's another constraint? Something that you can inflict upon yourself that can free you up to do the things that only you can do. Another constraint might be in money. A lot of times I've been guilty of, maybe you've heard as well, maybe you've said as well, you know what, if my blankety blank boss would only give me another $1 million, I could buy, fill in the blank, and then I could solve all the cybersecurity problems at the company I'm privileged to work at. And say that, and in complete transparency, I've said that before. You know, the reason I can't do that is I don't have any money. The reason I can't do that is my Splunk license only goes so far, or my visibility is not what it should be. And I think while it's easy to do that, it's easy to say I've got the constraint of I don't have enough money. Maybe there's some things that we can do. Maybe there's a way where the constraint might actually be able to show some new creativity or show a new possibility that if you had the money, if you had the license, if you had the things that you say that are standing in the way between you and maybe there's another way to do that. Back in 2011, I was working on a project and I became very excited about the critical security controls. Maybe you've heard of them, Center for Internet Security. They just give away a list of prioritized things to do that when you do them, according to a lot of organizations, U.S. federal government, other international approach to say, when you do these things, not only do you get your pretty, which is for a lot of us, but you also literally reduce the probability of a breach. When I do these things, I'm not just busy doing things that are mapped to compliance, mapped to visibility, a lot of automation, and got me really excited about that. When I heard about that, again, I heard about it first, I think 2008, started to think, well, what would that look like? They had examples where the U.S. Department of State, like that Department of State, with people in every time zone around the world on a sensitive but unclassified network in the very first year, reduced their vulnerabilities by 85%. So I looked in the mirror, like I was shaving, brushing my teeth, all the things that we do in the morning. I looked in the mirror and I said, self, what am I doing that has results like that? What am I doing that could show that I'm doing, whatever initiatives, things I'm working on, leading, doing, what am I doing to, and pretty quickly it struck me. Like nothing, no project working on have ever had that type of, with math and metrics and reporting to show a reduction in, well, much of anything, especially at that scale. I was excited about what they did. They were giving out charts and reports and templates. Here's how they did it. And very nice of them to do that for the community at the time. I was excited about it, but I was the security team. At that time, I was working to build a security function for a healthcare startup. They didn't have a security person. I went from a big team to being the team. I was excited about doing that. I just didn't have a way to make it happen. No more funding, no more budget. You know, just it was good we got a security person. Just be glad that you're here, because before there was no security person. I was excited about that, but the constraint of a lack of funding, I thought, well, I'm excited about that. What are some things that I can do? So I decided to read the fine manual. I had some security tools. Those were in place, but I knew I couldn't get any more. I thought, well, when I look at what state did, what would it look like if I decided to lean in metaphorically to the tools that I had to see is perhaps there's some undocumented features. Perhaps there's some capabilities in those tools that could get me a little bit closer to the results of what state had. And that's exactly what I did. This idea of the constraint, because I didn't have a support, I didn't have the money, didn't have the funding, but I was inspired by the work that someone else did, was able to literally write the first paper, give a presentation here at B-Sides Augusta actually a long time ago around what would it look like to solve for those controls without having to spend any money. So that constraint allowed the creativity. It's just an example. There's plenty of examples, but one example of I'm inspired to do that and not stopping with, and I can only do it if I have whatever money state had to solve that same problem. Why do I say that? Because I want you to think about some areas where maybe you're saying, if I only had 3 more people, if I had a managed service provider, if I had someone watching the alarms, if only I had these things, then I could solve that problem. So think about one. And think about what would it look like to creatively solve that problem. If you don't have enough money, you know, we never have enough money. What are some ways that we can lean in and solve for problems just like that. What was interesting is, gave that talk. My first ever talk was at B-Sides Atlanta. Back when B-Sides Atlanta used to be a whole really big deal, like way bigger than Augusta. Interesting how it's turned around. I gave a talk on how to do that. And two most recent folks who hired me for a full-time job, I wasn't looking, they were looking, they came in and heard the way to approach that, and I actually got my last 2 full-time jobs as a result of doing just that. If there's a constraint, where's the to find creativity to solve those particular problems? So it does work. It was out of necessity. It wasn't out for job hunting and looking for the next job, but interesting how life works sometimes. The second C I'd love to share right now is around culture. Culture. A lot of times, especially as leaders or aspiring leaders, you must ask yourself a question. Is this something that only I can do? Remember that instant response thing I talked about earlier on the previous C? Is this something that only I can do? At my last full-time job, so I live in Atlanta. There's like 6.5 million people in Atlanta. Traffic is nasty, awful, horrible. Of course, pre-pandemic. My commute to go 25 miles was a minimum of 45 minutes each way, and usually longer on the way home. So I get up early, go to work, get there early. Russell, how you doing? Living the dream. And I meant it sincerely, and I tried my best to leave at a decent time to not be stuck in just terrible traffic. So if you've been stuck in Atlanta traffic, I'm sorry. 45 minutes. I'd listen to podcasts, I'd do the things, I'd call my parents, call my brother, call my kid, all the things to kind of have an agenda for sitting in my car, sometimes moving, many times not moving. But one of the things I did every single time on the way to work is mentally, I would say, what are some things that only I can do? I'd ask myself that question. I'd assign myself that task. What are 3 things, Russell, that only you can do? And on the way home, which was always a much longer trip, I would ask myself, of those 3 things, did you do those 3 things? Those 3 things that only you can do. And by saying that, I'm not saying that I'm better than anybody at all in any form or fashion. Don't hear that. But because of the position, the responsibility, the role that I had as Chief Information Security Officer, I wanted to recognize that there's some things that only I could do. Maybe it was approve a policy or approve an exception or brief a board or whatever it might be, so that those that are doing the things to stop bad things from happening can have their time freed up to do what they do the best. What are things that only I can do? And if on the way home, when I asked myself, how well did I do those, I'd reach around, good job, did it, 1, 2, 3, yes. And if I didn't, I'd hold myself accountable on the way to work the next day. Maybe I'd have 4 things or 5 things or 6 things of what are some things that only I can do. Maybe it's small things, maybe it's canceling a meeting, it's so many things. But in a leadership position, what are some things that only you can do? For me, what I've seen, the success I've had at leading large and small and medium-sized security teams, culture is, well, everything. What would it look like if your colleagues, if those that you were privileged to lead, when they walked into the building, or they logged into Zoom or Teams or however you're working in this environment right now, what if when they were asked, how are you doing? What if they were to say, I'm living the dream. I know my purpose. I know my passion, and I'm doing things that align where my passion and purpose exist. I'm doing those things, and as much as possible, I'm not doing the things that I hate to do. I'm not working in a factory. I'm not delivering pizza. I'm not whatever the things that they were doing. What would it look like if you could create and design intentionally as a leader a culture where things like that would be said by those that you're privileged to lead? What would that look like? Just imagine, again, about what are some things that only you as a successful CISO can do. This one always makes me smile. An example would be, I called it, it's not a very creative name. If you can think of a more creative name, let me know. I'll change it. But I always call it the Cafeteria Test. no creativity in the name. But this idea that, if you work a 9-to-5 job or whatever your time is, at some point at larger organizations, maybe there's a cafeteria. You can go in and get lunch. And I can, just in my mind, I can just see cafeteria lines of places I've worked at in the past. You get your tray, you kind of walk around. Well, I'm going to get a burger, I'm going to get a hot dog, I'm going to get a salad, I'll eat healthy today, or I'll get a smoothie, what all the options are. But since you've got to go there anyway, since you should go there anyway, as you get your tray and as you walking around deciding what to get, what if you go on a mission? What if you, again, assign yourself some work? As you're carrying your tray around, what if you look around and you see people who are already there? They've already made their choice of the things that they're going to get, and you see, oh, there they are. You don't say anything, you just kind of watch. And then you kind of maybe walk towards them a little bit, not in a creepy way, but you get near them, and then they lock eyes. The second that happens, not a word is said, that little microsecond right there, when those eyes are locked and they see you, what do? When they see you, is it, I think I'd rather leave, I don't want a pizza, there's no way, there's that security guy coming, there's that security girl coming, and that's not good. Or, again, when you lock eyes, there's Russell, he fixed my problem. Whether him or his team or the team that's previously, what if you did that cafeteria test, like 2 or 3 people, not creepy, not goofy, I don't want you to go to HR and get in trouble. But what if you went to places where your coworkers are at and cafeteria test or something like that to say, how's that engagement? And maybe I do it another time, maybe I do it another time. I did that for 7 months. And what I found was I got nonverbal feedback. If there was tension, if there was happiness, if there's that blanking security people team again, whether it's about me or the team that I'm privileged to lead, didn't really matter. I wanted to see how we're showing up. How are we offering and adding value to those that we're working with? I've never been working at an organization that existed because of cybersecurity. I've been at places where companies make things and do things and serve things, and cyber is a way to reduce the risk in them doing that particular function. So I've never worked at a place where the reason we work here is cyber. But that's probably a good thing, because I get to help tailor and craft the culture such that when there's encounters at the cafeteria, at the entrance, at the exit, at the parking garage, where possible, I want them to be feeling better off than before they first engaged with us, or specifically with me. Did that for 7 months. I gave an assignment to those that were a direct report to me in the org chart and said, look, as a leadership team, I've tried this, I'm going to do this, and I want you to do the same thing. Why did I want them to do that? I wanted them to feel that tension. I wanted them to be more aware of how they were showing up and how those that they were privileged to lead were interacting with folks who out doing their things in common areas, and feel that, and then, where possible, change their behaviors, change their approach to be able to add more value. Again, this tells you how are you showing up? How's your team showing up? And from a culture perspective, what are things that you can do to better improve or mold the culture of the team that you're privileged to lead to better meet the needs of your respective organization? Again, goofy name, Cafeteria Test. It's been great. I've loved it. And it may be a little bit weird until you get back into, or if you do get back to an in-person scenario. But maybe you do it before you go to the next talk. Maybe you choose to do that today. Just something to think about. I talked about earlier, walking the halls, again, looking at the culture. I told earlier that idea of walking in and, Russell, how are you doing? Again, I'm living the dream. I can't imagine doing something other than what I'm doing now. It took being bold. It took asking questions. It took, frankly, me remembering what my life was like 25 years ago to be able to say that. But walk in the halls, as you walk the halls, or as you walk the Zoom calls, or as you walk the Teams, or WebEx, or whatever technologies you might be using in lieu of walking the halls, what does that look like to show up in a way? What would that look like? If you could talk to the person that recruited me to my last full-time job back in 2015, they talked to me for a very long time. Hey, will you come? Will you come and take a decrease in pay? Will you have a longer commute? And you have a higher stress level job? Okay, they didn't say that, but that's kind of how it works out sometimes. If you were to go to the HR recruiter that recruited me, and you were to say, Herb, of all the questions Russell asked before saying yes to that offer to go work and lead a very successful, very prominent security team at a super important organization, what's the key idea? What's the number one type of question? It was that. It was culture. What's it like to work there? Where I was working at before in telecommunications, I knew the culture. I've been there for a while. I knew how to navigate, how to get expense reports paid, how to cover for and take care of and communicate different issues. But at another organization, I didn't know the culture. I wanted to know, was I going to like to be there? Would they like for me to be there? Those ideas of what's it like to walk the halls, literally or metaphorically. Another way to think about culture is in this idea of understanding the culture and then saying, what would it look like to improve the culture? An idea I like is this idea of experimentation. Culture, a lot of times you can think of organization-wide culture, according to John Cotter, wicked smart, professor, author, student from Harvard Business School, said that culture change for large organizations, in his book called Leading Change, 3 to 10 years. You're like, wow, that's a long time. I have no idea where I'm going to be in 10 years. You have no idea if you'll be working at the same company in 10 years. So you might think, that's someone else's problem. But what if we thought about culture as the culture of the team that we're privileged to lead? Maybe we go from, I'd like the whole company culture to be better, but maybe I'm going to focus on some things that only I can do, and that's the culture of improving the culture in the team that I'm privileged to lead. I like this idea of experiments. What are some experiments? Let's just say, let's make it safe to try a couple of ideas. Here's an example of some things that I've done. Just some examples that you can consider as well. When I was CIO and CISO for a financial services organization, had an all-hands meeting, room for people, developers, help desk, security, DBAs, the whole bit. And I said, you know, what I've seen on my calendar is, bless you, there's a lot of recurring meetings. There's like sometimes double, triple, quadruple booked. It's like, how in the world can people not see that, like, I'm busy from 3 o'clock to 4 o'clock every Thursday, and no, I literally can't go to all those meetings. So I had an idea. I said, let's try this experiment. Let's try this experiment for everybody here in the room. The next time you get a meeting invite, and there's no agenda, like, the reason I want you in this meeting is I want you to talk about this thing and give us an update, and it'll only take this time, and then when you're done, you can leave if you want to. The next time you get a meeting invite and there's no agenda, you have my permission to go in and decline the meeting. And everybody's like, silence. What? But you can, I see there's a decline button, but I didn't know you could actually use it in your email calendaring system. I said, and if you feel bad about it, if you're not quite sure, click decline and put a little statement. Put these words. My boss, Russell, said that I don't have to go to the meeting without an agenda. Done. Blame me. It was an experiment. I wondered what would it look like if there was clarity around, why do you want me to go to that meeting? Why do I need to be there? What am I trying to achieve in that particular meeting? Fun fact. I didn't ask anybody's permission. I didn't go to my boss. Maybe I should have. I didn't go to my boss and say, hey, boss, here's what I want to do. Let's have a committee. Let's do a study. I just said, I'm sensing there's a problem there. I'm sensing maybe you don't like to go to all these meetings. Blame me. I never got in trouble. I never even told my boss, like before, during, or after. But all of a sudden, there was people going to less meetings and people having clarity of the reason I'm at this meeting is I need to give a report on whatever. I need to give a status on whatever. I need to do those particular things. Nobody got fired. Nobody got in trouble. And even though, I don't know if anyone ever did it, if anyone ever said, the reason I'm not going to this meeting, but nobody ever called me and says, why aren't you people going to meetings anymore? It was an experiment. We made it safe to try. We did a little time box. Hey, let's try it for 90 days. Let's just see what's going to happen. If we get into it and we realize it's not going to work, I'll take the blame. Seriously, I'll take the blame. But what would it look like if we create an environment in our or try them? We're better off. Ever do? I would think about how to look at those. I've got this idea. I'm a developer. If I were a developer, I've got this idea. And if you're a developer, let's go in business together. We'll be rich together. I've got this idea. Let's just imagine if before you scheduled a meeting in whatever scheduling service that you use for meetings, imagine easy math. You've got 10 people, and for easy math, everyone makes $100 an hour. What would it look like as you go and add those 10 people or those distribution lists and you say it's going to, you click the button, there was like a dollar thing that said, 100 times 10 equals what? So let's just say there was a little pop message that came up that said, are you sure you're going to get with a value before you? If you are, knock it out. Hope you get $1,000 of value for that one thing. If you don't. Anyway, I've got this idea. If it was a way to people make different money and I made easy numbers and just math there, what would it look like if we understood the cost of the things that we're doing before we did the things that we're doing? Are we getting that much value? Again, let me know if you got ways to think making a plugin like that could make someone a lot of money. In culture as well, how we talk, how we say things. I mentioned before, living the dream. I don't care if you laugh. I know where I came from. I know not that long ago, I was not living the dream. But other ways to look at language. Isn't it fun sometimes when you do, say, phishing tests, and people click on it, and maybe it's fun to say things like, users, they're the weakest link. Those users, they don't know what they're doing. They're the weakest. That's why this is happening. They're just not smart enough to use our systems. And in full disclosure, I hated saying that. I don't even say that. But I wanted to say that because I've said that before. And maybe you say that now. Maybe your team has said things like that before. If those accountants were only smart enough to not click on those links. If that DBA just had sense about themselves, they wouldn't do these things. When we blame others, when we have someone else is so bad is a DBA clicked on a link, all of a sudden it's their fault. What would it look like if we changed it a little bit? I don't want people clicking on links, and you may or may not focus on that. I know a lot of companies I work with are focusing on that. But what if you change the narrative from users are stupid, they're dumb, they don't have any sense, they're not smart enough, they shouldn't have access to the internet? And what if you change it to our colleagues are the biggest target? The access our CFO has, the access our accountants has is so valuable that an attacker wants to get their credentials and do bad things. How can I protect them better? Or maybe in this question. This is a tough one too. Ask the question. After your next phishing exercise or any social engineering type of test that you do, what if instead of saying it's their fault, what if you said this question? What was it about my training that led the database administrator to say it's okay to click on links in every single email that they get? What was it about my training? what would it look like if we took some responsibility for the language that we use and ways that we try to do that? Here's a hack. Anybody know the mission of your respective organization? Who? What's the mission of your company? Beautiful. Crisp, clear, concise. You know why. We spoke about it last night. We know exactly why you do the things you do, the population that you serve when you do that, and I'm grateful that you do that and that you know. I've never worked at a place that was in security alone. What if I, Monday morning, so I'm giving you some homework, so I think about, Monday, when you go log in, however you log in, or show up, however you show up at your respective, what if you spend a minute? I don't know the mission of my calendar, an appointment for 5 minutes to go. What would it look like if I was able to quote the mission of my company? An example that I can't remember all the words. I wish I could, but I can't. But I'll use an example of the American Red Cross. The American Red Cross to serve the most vulnerable. Let's just imagine that Monday morning we all wake up and we're all the Chief Information Security Officer for the American Red Cross, whose mission is to serve the most vulnerable. What would it look like if when we logged in on Tuesday, the next day after we discovered the mission at the American Red Cross, with all of us being Chief Information Security Officer there, what would it look like if every action that we took, we would say these words: the reason I'm going to this meeting is to serve the most vulnerable. What if the person who's leading the chief of the incident handling team, if they said, the reason I'm the chief of the incident handling team is I'm going to serve the most vulnerable. The reason why our security team has a strategy for the next 3 years is I'm going to serve. I want to lead people that serve the most vulnerable. What would it look like if you intentionally changed the culture of your security team from we're smart, we're lead, we can APT, and we can DLP, and all the acronyms that we can acronym? There's value there. I'm not dismissing the things you've learned and the capabilities that you have and the ambitions that you aspire to have, whether it's be a CISO or understand a CISO better. But what if, as a leader, you changed the culture to such places where, forgot that, that you were able to align and support your team in that way? What if January 2 of next year, if that's the first day your team comes into work, what if they knew and had in their job description and had in their performance objectives, the reason I'm the chief of the incident handling team is the mission of your company. The reason I'm scanning all my systems every day, all the time, is the mission of your respective organization. So, mission for knowing, so since you know the mission of your company, you well deserved. Thank you for that. What would it look like if you did that on purpose, with a purpose? What will it cost you? 5 minutes of time? That's what I want for you. So think about it that way. And then also looking at clarity. Again, having the reason that I do the things I do. I talked about the commute time that I used to have. Now it's just going down to the basement. So it's like I got to talk really fast, like to go down 15 steps is my commute now versus in the past driving around Atlanta. But again, what are 3 things that only I can do? And how can I hold myself to account to make sure that I'm doing those respective things? That's what we're looking at there. Great book here, Greg McEwen, this idea of Essentialism. Anyone read this book? So Greg McEwen, Greg McEwen, that idea of all the meetings, of all the responsibilities, of all the things that we have to do, how our mind gets as cluttered as the diagram at the top left there. that idea, he gives the analogy of looking at your closet, like literally the closet, say in your bedroom, of all your clothes and all your, besides Augusta shirts, and all the other shirts and all the other things that you have, and how when it's a big clutter, it's hard to go and find the shirt that you're looking for. It's hard to find the pants that you're looking for, or the shorts that you're wanting to wear, whatever. But this idea of what are some things that only I can do is a way to think about clearing out all that junk, saying no to those meetings, stopping those assignments, getting out of those groups and out of those gatherings where you're not uniquely qualified and set up for success and be successful in that way. Time, I've learned that no is a complete sentence. Now, I've learned that. Now, how old am I? 52-year-old man finally learning that a no is a complete sentence. Not a no, I don't want to, not a I'll ask you later, that let me get back with you later, I'll tell you. No. No, that's not something that only I can do. No, I shouldn't run and take over from the chief incident handling team a minor incident that I'm still talking about 7 years later. No, that's not something that aligns to the mission of our respective organization. No, that's not my job right now. No, that's not something that only I can do. A dear friend and former colleague of mine, single mother from Dallas, Texas, she would say, when someone asked her as a senior cybersecurity leader, CISO of a very important company, when they would ask her to do something, her name's Bridget, when she said, they say, hey, Bridget, will you come serve on this committee? Hey, Bridget, will you go write that policy? Hey, Bridget, will you go do whatever? She said she would literally close her eyes and in her mind's eye have a picture of her daughter, Abby. And all of a sudden, when she could see in her mind's eye a visual of her daughter, Abby, she could make a better decision. Do I want to be on that committee and be away from my daughter, or would I rather be with my daughter? Now, I don't have a daughter whose name is Abby. I have a daughter whose name is Lindsay. I have a son whose name is Jackson. But when she said that, I thought, that makes it so much easier to decide, am I going to say yes to this, or should I say no to that? From a family perspective, in addition to the things that get required and compelled to do in corporate life as well. There's a little hack from a dear friend, Bridget, on how she personified that. She wanted to be a great mother, and one of the ways that she was able to do that is to imagine what's at stake. When I say yes, I'm going to stay late. When I say yes, I'm going to work the weekend. When I say yes, I'm going to do those things. Unless I have in my mind what's at stake, like a picture of my wife or my son or my daughter, or important things that I want to do, I might go ahead and say, well, yeah, there's room on my calendar. I'll go ahead and say yes. Put systems in place. Find the things that are most important to you. Spouse, friends, family, neighbor, whatever it might be. UPS drivers, Amazon, it doesn't matter what it is. But imagine who are the things and people that are important to you. And before you say, yes, I'll do that, think of what you're going to say no to. If I say yes to this thing, I've said no to everything else that could happen at that particular time. And also be aware that with success comes a lot of opportunity. The more successful that you become, the more your boss promotes you, gives you raises, gives you assignments, gives you more than one job to do at a time, hypothetically, of course. The more you're going to have to recognize that and find a visualization or find a practice to where you're not just doing all the things for all the people all the time, you'll find yourself in a bad way. What I like to do is to do a calendar audit. So this is the second day of the first quarter for this year. So Monday, I've got a calendar appointment. You saw my calendar when we got plugged in earlier. It's full of reminders, full of things. At the beginning of every quarter, I go do a calendar audit. What are recurring meetings, recurring tasks, recurring items that I have on my calendar now that might not be most appropriate for the fourth quarter of this year? Are there some places where I can say, no, I don't want to go there anymore. No, I don't need to go do that anymore. No, that's not going to help me achieve my goals, my end of the year goals. I'm going to have a reminder go off at some point Monday morning that says, go revisit that. Go make sure that the things on your calendar horizon are still things that matter a lot. So be aware of success and put some systems in place to help you nudge you so that you have to keep brain space of remembering that every quarter, but maybe just a minute, recurring calendar reminder, am I still working on the things I need to work on, and have it remind you every 90 days. You set up a system, and the system can remind you periodically to do the things such as say no. The last one to talk about, 10 minutes left, and I'm going to see how quickly we can land the plane ahead of schedule, is this, customer service. A friend of mine in Atlanta has been a senior leader at the Ritz-Carlton. Anyone stayed at a Ritz-Carlton before? Nice service. Okay, very nice service. Very extraordinary customer service that they have in place. One of the many reasons they have that, from Horace Schultz, who was the founder. This is an Atlanta-based company, fun fact, headquartered in Atlanta, first one was in Atlanta. But Horace Schultz, the CEO, or former CEO, he since retired from that, he empowered his employees to be able to meet, if not exceed, the needs of the guests. As a matter of fact, you may have heard the statement, ladies and gentlemen serving ladies and gentlemen. That's where it came from. They actually have pre-approved any associate working at Ritz-Carlton when they see a problem that a guest has. They've pre-approved them to be able to spend up to $2,000 per incident to fix that problem, whatever that problem is. No rules, no forms, no approvals, just fix the problem. We want to have ladies and gentlemen serving ladies and gentlemen. Wasn't lunch great? When you go to Chick-fil-A, matter of fact, when I picked up my sandwich after depositing my ticket, and the person put the Chick-fil-A thing in my hand, and I said thank you, what was the response that they gave back to me? My pleasure. Why is that? We can get a chicken sandwich anywhere, and it costs about the same thing. Couple bucks, get some fries, get a Diet Coke, I'm on my way. Why is it that I go to a certain place to get my chicken sandwiches versus other places that maybe have chickens from the same place, and maybe it's even a little bit cheaper? What you may not know is that leaders, senior leaders, a lot of leaders from Chick-fil-A got their customer service training right there. And a friend of mine, Eddie, who used to be those trainers, he would go to companies, and Chick-fil-A and other companies, and say, here's what makes Ritz-Carlton culture so wonderful. It was the focus on service. How can I realize that every job I've ever had so far has not been in place to do cyber, but cyber helps the company? Maybe it lets them take more risks. Maybe it helps them to protect their assets better as they're growing, developing, doing all the things the company do. When I talked to my friend Eddie, who's done a lot of education, such as Chick-fil-A, I said, Eddie, what's the biggest mistake? You've traveled around the world, you've trained people, you've lived in that culture, you've done things, you've been very successful in the foods and beverage service industry. What's the number one mistake that you see? And what he told me was the number one mistake that my friend Eddie in Atlanta sees when he did this training was people get excited, they get in the room, oh, yeah, we need to go do that, we need to have my pleasure, or whatever the statement, whatever that cultural improvement would be at your company. But when they get back to their job on Monday, they don't take action. Knowing what to do and not doing it. So don't be like, look for places to delight. What would it look like, whether you save my pleasure, whether you give $2,000 pre-approval, whatever it is, what would it look like for you as someone who's privileged to lead people that do cyber? What would it look like if you had a phrase, or you had a motto, or you had a contest, or you had something even goofy that they could align to and then better serve those that you're privileged to work with? What if you, instead of saying users, those stupid users, I hate to say that, what if you changed that? What if you said, like, I'm in my job because I've got specialized skills, I know what I'm doing. The CFO, they've got skills, they've got degrees, they've got training, they've got experience, and they're an expert in their field too. They're just not an expert in, well, the things that we're an expert in. So I made it out of Maytag. I'm grateful that they my school. So grateful not to be in front of you today, talking for the last 54 minutes of what are 4 keys to be a successful Chief Information Security Officer. I'm living the dream because not that long ago, I was not living the dream. And I wish I had pictures. I wish there was a capability to have like, this is the picture. It looks a whole lot. I was being there. The boss who had expectations, the body from getting hurt from steel on coils and machines, 500-ton presses going up and down, doing the things that they do to make stoves. I'm grateful for that. And I'm also grateful that that's not my story right now, because I looked for some keys to make me be the very best version of myself. I solved a problem. To be busy. But when I ask a question of what are some things that only I can do, is this something that only I can do? It's like that. Doing the cafeteria test. When someone locks eyes with me, there's Russell, he solves my problems. There's Russell, I'd rather leave than have to talk to Russell. I'm going to skip my lunch because what's the response? How are you showing up? That's how we win. Through 4 things: constraints, whether you put them on yourself or they're placed upon you, how can you leverage them? Culture, one of the most important things for you as a leader, is this something that only I can do? Creating, supporting, refining, improving the culture of those that you're privileged to lead. That's how you win as a CISO. Having the clarity, these are things that only I can do. If I don't do them, my team is not going to be able to be the best in the world. They're not going to have the access or the tools or the representation that they need in order to be successful. Customer service. We saw it today at lunch. When someone handed you your chicken sandwich and you said thank you, you experienced, in my opinion, legendary customer service, because they've been trained, they say that, and I think in most cases they actually mean it is their pleasure to put a chicken sandwich in your hand. I'll end with this. The very best advice I've ever been given was given to me when I was working at Maytag. And the advice is this: talk I give every single thing 25 years ago. Get wisdom as cheaply as you can. Get wisdom as cheaply as you can. What I want for you, I want you to not have to learn these 4 lessons the hard way. Whether you're a CISO, you want to be a CISO, or you wonder what in the world of a Chief Information Security Officer, that's what I want for you. Make your mistakes, be clear, be clever, be creative in making them, but you don't have to make these if you follow these steps to be a successful Chief Information Security Officer. And that's it. Thanks for being here. I really appreciate it.